morning. Welcome to Joy in Our Town. I'm your host, Lorene Tanaka. Now, labels on food products contain a lot of information, except if the food was genetically engineered. We have with us today Dr. Ashley Lukens, and she's a director with the Hawaii Center for Food Safety. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
This is good information. Now tell us, why don't these labels contain this information?
Yeah, that's a really great question. We've done a lot of surveying, the Center for Food Safety has. We have over 500,000 members across the U.S. And we've done broad national surveys, and it shows that 90% of people in the U.S. want
They do want to
the
see
label on their food, and yet it's not on. So what's happening? Vermont was actually the first state to just pass mandatory labeling for all foods consumed within the state of Vermont.
So every product in the supermarket?
Yeah, following Connecticut and Maine, who have triggered GE labeling bills. But other states have failed to be able to get labeling. And why is that?
Why?
They've often failed 51 to 49%, so really close. And a lot of people say it's the amount of money that the food industry has put into fighting these labeling bills. So maybe we don't have access to the information because sort of larger industry interests don't want folks to know if their food
But
is
the money they spent fighting it, they could have spent labeling.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean, we're at an interesting historical time right now where I think people across the U.S. are saying, you know, I want to know more about my food. I think we went through a good 2 decades of people knowing less and less about their food, but we're seeing a great returning to the garden, to the farm, to the kitchen.
Organic.
Yeah, right. And so we want to know what's in our food, and 63 other countries label if foods have been genetically engineered, so why can't we?
So then what it leads us to believe, what are they hiding?
Yeah, I think a lot of people just want the right to know. They feel like the industry says that the foods are safe. They're substantially equivalent, if you will, to their non-genetically engineered counterparts. And so if they're substantially the same, then label them.
it. Say that.
Yeah.
Put it on
Here
there.
in Hawaii, we've had a lot of trouble getting a GE labeling bill passed because I think people are worried about implementation. What is it going to look like when a state starts to require the labeling of a process? But luckily we have Vermont to work out all those details. And so
now we're using the terminology GE for genetically engineered. What is GMO?
Yeah, so I think it's just a battle of words.
Oh, okay,
The scientifically preferred nomenclature is GE because genetic engineering is a process. And when we talk about labeling, we label dozens of other processes. If you look on your lemonade made from concentrate, that's labeling a process. If your food's been irradiated, it will say irradiated, labeling a process. So by saying genetic engineering, we're saying let's label a process. GMO is more sort of, seems to imply something stable. It's an organism, a fixed something. Genetic engineering, again, highlights that this food has undergone a different process.
So how close are we to getting something like that passed?
Labeling, I feel really confident about it. I think here in Hawaii we have the great task of bringing together diverse stakeholders and really helping us reach a middle ground about what labeling would look like for a small island in the middle of the Pacific. How can we implement that? And I think people have concerns that, you know, should we label here? Will that have any impact on the supply of food into Hawaii? Luckily, we know that the European Union requires labeling, and they've had no trouble getting foods that are labeled into their markets. So we feel really confident.
So that hurdle has been passed.
Yeah, so I think we're really close. We'll definitely see labeling, another labeling bill next session. And if it doesn't pass, I also think we might see labeling at the federal level. Senator Schatz is a big supporter of federal labeling, as is Representative Tulsi Gabbard. So we have really strong advocacy at the federal level in support of GE labeling.
Wow. This is interesting. Now, you sent over an article we were going through, and I was alarmed, so I'm just going to say it. It said 88% of U.S. corn is GE. I love corn.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my first thing to you is don't worry. The corn you're thinking about, corn on the cob, is sweet corn, and there are only a few varieties of sweet corn that have been genetically engineered.
Okay.
The bulk of corn that's grown that is genetically engineered goes to two things. One, it goes to feed animals.
Okay.
So cattle, chickens, pork, it becomes animal feed, and then also fuel.
But then it becomes our feed, too.
Yeah, so if you do eat meat, it turns into the animals,
Right.
and there are concerns about that, that so much of our feed supply is genetically engineered. But for right now, it's mostly feed and fuel, and then also food additives. A lot of the preservatives and sweeteners that go into common processed foods contain genetically engineered ingredients. So if you look at your soda and you see high fructose corn syrup, that corn was likely to be genetically engineered.
So it could be in our foods in varying degrees, from like a 1% to maybe as high as who knows?
100%.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Right? We don't really
know. A corn
know.
chip could probably be 100% GE.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we were chatting about, well, why does that matter? A lot of proponents of genetic engineering will say, it's already in everything. You're already eating it every day.
So don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it.
Just keep doing what you're doing.
Nobody's fallen over and died, so it's safe. Others, Europe, for example, adopts the precautionary principle. So let's just make 100% sure before we launch into this sort of mass experiment of exposure to a technology that, again, the science is out on. Hasn't been proven safe or unsafe. And the thing about labeling is we're not saying it's dangerous. If it was dangerous, we'd be trying to get it off the shelves.
Of course, I hope so.
We're just saying, give people the right to choose. And by giving a label, you democratize access to that information. So I have my PhD, I'm well studied in food. I feel really confident navigating the grocery store. But my mom, when she goes to shop for my daughter, she feels very overwhelmed. She says, I know you want me to avoid this, but I don't know where it is. You know, so it's really about...
So it's not like there's a GE section in the market and then there's a non-GE section.
The entire supermarket, probably, except for the produce.
Now let's just touch a little on your daughter, because she's instrumental in getting you very interested in this.
Yeah, you know, when I became a mom, and I think every mom goes through this, you sort of pick your battles. You decide, I'm going to, you know, maybe really focus on education, or I'm going to really focus on creative play or music. And for me, healthy eating was the place where I felt empowered as a mom. I felt confident. I felt like I knew what I could do.
You could control how that was going to happen.
And so
what you cooked, what you practiced.
Yeah, so I made my own baby food, I breastfed, I really tried to do everything I could do to know
What a lucky girl.
where my daughter's food was coming from. And labels became increasingly important to me in that journey. And
frustrating as well.
Yeah, I think it became frustrating for me just because as soon as I wanted a label, I was faced with this backlash that I was anti-science, that I was anti-technology, and I just said, no, I just want...
But we are in a world of information right now. We're in a world of everybody wants information and can get it anywhere, you think, except on our
food labels, unless we were in Europe or half of the rest of the world. So I think that, again, if we can find moments in our lives when we can empower consumers, give them access to the information that they need to make choices, a lot of people will say, I don't care.
So, okay, so with so much of the public, and we've been hearing so much of it in the news, so much of the public wanting this on the label, it doesn't make sense why. You said because of the cost to the manufacturers. What cost? That they would have to come up with new labels?
I don't actually think cost is a factor.
Okay.
I think that, for example, First Lady Michelle Obama just required all the nutrition fact labeling to be changed. And so you're going to see a big, clearer picture of what's in your food. So we're okay with changing labels all the time.
So what's the big obstacle?
I don't know. I think there's been a lot of industry pushback, and I think people want to know why. And I don't have that answer. I'm not a representative.
I wonder if it's just maybe being adverse to change. I mean, a lot of people are just adverse to change.
I do know, though, that if you told me I know something, but I'm not going to tell you.
Right.
I would want to know more.
I want to know, exactly. It's like, okay, Ashley, that's okay. You don't have to tell me. I'll go find out someplace else.
So when the food industry, when the seed industry puts money into saying no to labeling, I think it just galvanizes
Fuel the fire to want
more
to know.
people to want to know. And it makes the debate more confusing because a lot of folks wouldn't necessarily have a problem eating GE foods. They just don't like being told they don't get to know when they're doing it.
Exactly, exactly. So are there, when foods are GE'd or genetically engineered, are there risks to humans?
I think the science is out on that. And I think the fight for labeling is not a fight about whether GE foods are dangerous. And that's a really important, what I call consensus building moment. Because we, at the Center for Food Safety, aren't necessarily pushing that these foods are dangerous.
Okay, that's an important point.
We're pushing that people should have access to this information, particularly here in Hawaii, where we have a much deeper relationship with some of the companies that are involved in genetic engineering. And so it's really important to us that this is just about access to information.
Some of these companies that are genetically engineering food, they take out food patents to protect that particular process, if you will, or a product. So if they're taking out patents and they know this, I guess it seems like to me just the next step, just put it on the label.
Yeah.
Right? I mean you're already doing it. You're already doing the paperwork.
Paradoxical moment where they say the food is substantially equivalent, so they don't have to label it.
Yes.
But at the same time, it's significantly different to allow for a patent.
Exactly.
So again, there's a point of confusion, and I think the best way to clear up that confusion is to label. Now, studies show that a lot of Americans aren't interested in eating GE foods. So some of us wonder, is that why they don't want to label? Because they know that they'll lose their market. But again, Vermont has passed a labeling bill, and I think we're going to have the opportunity to really see the ripple effects across the marketplace.
Oh, good, good. So what each person should do, or each family, or each mom, or each father, what they should do is just educate themselves on this, really look at it, and try to see where they want to stand or where they are on this.
I think right now we have two steps. I call this the dance of grassroots politics, but you can take the step in your personal life. You know, if you buy organic, you know it hasn't been genetically engineered. If you get to know your farmers, shop at local farmers markets, you can find out, do you grow any genetically engineered?
Straight from the source.
If you avoid processed foods, it's a really easy way to avoid GE. So those are your private choices.
Good.
But I like to think about also helping others who might not be prepared to help themselves. And I think that's where you lend your public support to labeling. Because you say, I might have the means or the capacity to make these choices, but others might not. So I'd like to fight for labeling to give everybody access to the information they need.
That would be good.